Blender for Noobs.
Hello and welcome to part 7 of the secrets of Blender modeling and modeling the Berkey spacecraft. In this part of the tutorial, we're going to be looking at creating these minute details that you see on various parts of this ship. Basically, if we take a good look, let me control up arrow so we can see this full image, and we look at these details, really, I mean, we can zoom in on this, but we really don't know. Even though we're zoomed in, we don't know what these are. We have no clue. This might be a solar panel over here. This looks like part of the lunar module from the space program. We have, if we look down here, we have what looks like a platform, another platform with just various things that are sticking out. Really not a whole lot of detail here, and like I said before, that's the way the artist intended to do this, is to really provide tons of detail on the spacecraft without really providing any clue as to what it was. So we are left as the viewer with our imagination to kind of interpret what we're seeing. Now, we as a 3D modeler really don't have the luxury of creating objects that we can't tell at least some idea what they are. Now, in the final render, we can do some compositing and we can make them less clear. We can blur them and do different effects on them to try to recreate that effect. But we have to create something in the 3D world that will fit onto our model. So that's what we're going to do. So control up arrow back here. And I'm just going to choose the first layer. And what I'm going to do is start creating these details on a different layer so we won't be distracted by any other pieces of the ship. But first I want to get something as far as knowing the location and the scale of the details. So I'm just going to do a Shift A, create a cube, bring it up here, scale it way down, bring it down here, bring it back a little bit, scale it way down. Do a SZ, scale it up along the Z-axis, scale it down some more. Okay, and what I'm doing here is just giving myself an idea of what the scale needs to be as far as some of these details and where it's going to be located. So with that, I'm going to choose M to move to another layer, and I'm just going to move over here to the second layer, and I'm just going to click the second layer and turn on that second layer. And this is where we're going to start. So I'll just keep this cube, this part that I created, as sort of a reference, and go to control up arrow, and we'll just start making different things. The first thing that we're going to make, we're going to be making a lot of different pieces, and the idea here, just to go back for a second, is I'm not going to try to mimic all of this here exactly or anything. What we're going to do is we're going to just create a bunch of details that we can fit in different areas. Now, instead of trying to work on the model itself and to put everything in place from the beginning, it's going to be easier to create a bunch of little details that we can then place in the different areas separately. In fact, we're going to use some of these smaller details to throw inside the front of the craft and the rear also. So basically what we want to do is create sort of get ourselves a library of different pieces that we can use. So back in our full screen view, first thing that I'm going to create is something that I think all of these industrial type of spacecraft or models should have, and that is a mast. So in order to create our first piece, the mast, I'm just going to do a Shift A, create another cube, or in fact, let's just duplicate this, it'll be easier. That way we don't have to resize it as much. Okay, so tab in edit mode, choose faces, and I'm just going to delete the top, turn off occlude here so I can see the bottom, delete the top and bottom there, X delete faces. And actually, because we're going to go into such minute detail and have just, we're going to start to have a lot of faces right now. If I tab back in object mode, and let me just select everything here. You see that we have right around 28,000, just over 28,000 faces. So in adding all these details, our polygon count is going to just start going through the roof. So we need to do, be thinking ahead as far as how we need to create these in order to reduce our polygon count. As we're modeling, you just want to think about that, kind of think ahead in that way to try to reduce along the way. So what I'm going to do is, instead of using a cube, I'm going to delete these two faces and choose edges, and just choose that and shift select that edge and choose face. So that's just created a face along that edge. Go to 7 top view, and if I come along here, let me choose vertices, choose those, B box select those, and just scale those inward to get sort of more like a right triangle. And that way, instead of using the, didn't want to do that. 7 top view. Okay, and I'm going to scale Shift Z so I don't scale along the Z. There we go. Okay, and that way, right off the bat, we have eliminated just tons of geometry that we're going to be creating. All right, so to create this mast, I'm just going to select all these vertices here and just scale it down quite a bit. Okay, 7 top view. While I have everything selected, I'm going to just do a Shift D, duplicate, and put one, let's put one right here, kind of rotate it, and Shift D, move one right here, and kind of rotate it like that. We're not going to be able to have all sides. I want the sides to kind of point to the other sides, but we're not going to be able to do that because of the shape that it is. Okay, and select all of them, do an SZ to scale. Okay. And then I'm just going to grab one of these, B box select it, go to, let's do one front view, and Shift D, duplicate that, scale it down quite a bit, SZ, scale it up, G, move it here, and I'm just going to make like a cross member here, like this. But we want to make sure that it's in the middle of these two, which it pretty much is. And Shift D, rotate the other way, make a cross member. Now I've done masks so many different ways that it's really kind of crazy. I know that there's easier ways to do it, but just working on the fly, this is the way I'm going to do these. L select that one, Shift D to duplicate these, and just going to G move it and rotate it into place here. Same thing with this. Shift D, rotate, sort of like that. So we're ending up something like what you see here. Now I also want kind of a section that's over the top, so let me L select this, Shift D to duplicate, and let's just do an RX90, bring it up here. We also want to scale this one down quite a bit, and let's scale on the Y. 7, rotate it into place. Doesn't have to be exact. And then if you want to adjust the geometry on the sides here, B box like that. Okay. Okay, and then if you want to size this along that angle that it's made at, an easy way to do that, 1, 2, 3, select those vertices and use our GG tool or function, which is one of our nice secrets here. and just move that into place. Okay, need a couple more of these. So I'm just going to L select that, go into the top view, Shift D to duplicate, and rotate it into place. Shift D to duplicate. Rotate it into place. So we have something that looks sort of like that. Okay, not very impressive by itself, but if we go Control Up arrow, go to our modifiers, we're going to add an array modifier. So choose array, and we want to move these along the Z. It's by default you have it's making duplicates along the X. So we're just going to change this to 0 and change the Z to 1. And we can bump up our count here. And we have an instant mast. So one of the things I notice is I want these cross members to be closer to the bottom of this. So what I need to do is B box select all these vertices here and move them up. All right, there. Okay, and probably the same thing with these top here. If I go into front view, just B box select the very top and just bring those down a little bit, just so those go together a little bit better. The other thing I want to do is I want these side pipes, or whatever you want to call them, the side of the mast to be thinner than this. So I'm just going to L select this, scale it down, but I don't want to scale on the Z, so S Shift Z, and just want to scale that down quite a bit, maybe about right there, and L select these and X delete faces. I'll select this one, go into top view, Shift D to duplicate, and just get these into position. Okay, so it looks something like that. The idea is, you know, probably I could even go make it thinner than this, because we want to be able to see that it is some kind of mast, and there's a lot of, right now there's a lot of noise in there, which it may be alright in the render. But the nice thing about this mast now is we can do a Shift D duplicate, move one over, and if we need it to be a longer mast, we can just extend that one very easily. But I'm going to X delete that because we have our basic piece right here that we can work with, and we can make several more from that. Okay, back in our full screen view. The next thing that I'm going to make, and that I think is important for our spacecraft to have, is some sort of satellite dish. So I'm just going to create that by doing a Shift A and create a UV sphere. Go into my tools menu and check my settings here. Doesn't have to be very detailed, and I think probably this is good, 16 and 12. We'll leave that as it is. And tab into edit and choose faces. Go into our one view here, and I'm just going to B box select probably all of these faces, X delete faces, and we're left with this sort of dish type of look, which is what we want. And I'm just going to select all of this and scale along the Z and scale it way down. And I'm going to rotate on the Y by 90. Actually, I want it pointing the other way just because that's the way I want it pointing. So RY 180. Okay, and we need something here in the middle in order to I don't know, give it that look that it has something that makes it a satellite dish. So I'm just going to select all of these faces in here, extrude, come out, extrude again, scale down, extrude again, scale down, extrude, and come out something like this. Doesn't have to be anything special because all of this is going to be seen at a distance. Now, a thing of note here, of course, if you were going to create this space station or craft so that you can get close-ups of it, then you would want to put in the work towards, making sure that these things are more detailed than what they are. I mean, a lot of times you can get away with it depending on what kind of render you're going to do, but since this thing is so highly detailed, I'm pretty much sticking to fairly low polygon pieces, and I don't want to get, I want to try to keep my polygon count down as much as possible as I'm moving along. Now also for our dish, we might need something on the back side that it's attached to. So I'm going to do a Shift A, create a cube, scale it down, move it into place. Okay, let's try to get this thing a little bit more precise. And again, I can get rid of this face right here. Take this one, extrude, extrude in, delete that face, and extrude, scale down, extrude, scale down and upward, maybe even the sides. Okay, and as we place these dishes, then we can use these pieces to kind of mount the dish possibly, or move it around as we need it. So we'll leave that as it is. This will be our basic dish. Okay, and now I'm just going to make some little antenna pieces. In order to do that, I'm going to select this, and I'll select this piece here, Shift D, duplicate it, bring it out, and I'm going to choose P to separate it by selection, just so I'll have a separate piece here. And nice thing is I've already got it, I got the array modifier on it, but actually I don't want that on this, so I'm going to X delete that modifier, come back in here, and let's select vertices, B box, select that, and just pull it down. Again, using the triangular shape just to cut down on the number of polygons that we have. Select all of that, scale it down, SZ to scale along the Z, Shift D to duplicate, RY 90, move this up, scale along the X, Shift D to duplicate, duplicate another, I'll select this one, Shift D to duplicate, move it along here, SZ to scale along the Z. Okay, not very impressive by itself, but this will be some of the small antenna pieces that are sticking out of the craft. Go ahead and do a save as I'm working so I don't lose all my nice work that I'm doing here. Okay, next I'm going to make something that looks sort of like a solar panel. Now, what I'll probably do with the panels is I'll texture them, and then if we need to, I'm going to duplicate those and make them a lot smaller. So we may not even use this, but just in case, I'm going to go ahead and make one. So Start by using one of these. Just L select this piece here, Shift D, move it out, P and separate by selection, and then work on this piece here. Shift D to duplicate that one, RY90, and move it up, SX, scale along the X. Might be easier in front view here. Shift D to duplicate that. And just duplicating these pieces along the length here. Okay, so something that really looks more or less like a ladder. Barely see it if it's too far away. And really I think I want to go ahead and add one to the end there. Okay, just in case I do use them as panels. Okay, and we need some kind of like a square object, so I'm just going to do a Shift A, create a cube, scale it way down, move it over here, tab into edit mode, do a Control R, and move the mouse wheel up to get several cuts here. Select those, go into face view here. And I'm just going to Alt select these faces here, Shift Alt select these other faces, and choose E extrude, and I'm going to scale along the Z and Y axis, so not the X. So S, Shift X, scale inward. Okay, and that gets us kind of an interesting shape. I think I will actually go into front view and get rid of this part here, faces, and go into edges and just shift select all these edges here and create a face. And maybe even scale that down some more. Okay, and if we go back to our reference image, you may remember we've seen some strange things like this thing here. There's sort of something like that back here. Not sure if there's any more on the craft, but anyway, I want to make something of that nature, so I'm going to go ahead and go in here, Shift A, create a UV sphere, RX90, rotate it along the 90, scale it down, move it over here so we can work with it, and tab into edit mode. Let's choose faces, and we're going to create something that looks sort of like windows on it, so I'm just going to select these faces here, E extrude and scale inward, and maybe downward as well. Same thing here, select these four, E, scale it downward, E extrude, and one more set right here. Okay, and for the middle, let me go ahead and turn on occlude so it'll be a little bit easier. Just going to C, oops, I'm going to select out of there and just C, select all of these, E, scale it down, E, bring it out a little bit, E, scale it down some more, and scale it inward, something like that. Again, I have no clue, what it might be, but it's going to look interesting from a distance. And then I'm going to grab one of these pieces here. In fact, this one right here, Shift D, move it over and make it a separate part with the P key, and just going to join it to this one, Control J. So then I can grab this, L select, G, move it over here, get it closer to where it needs to be. SC, scale it down a little bit, duplicate it, okay, and maybe even if you like, you can select these and duplicate all these. And give it a little bit of variety. Okay. So far so good. We have 6 different assets in our library that we can use to start creating our details. But really, because of the details on this craft, we need a lot more items. So continue to move along here. So we did notice some platforms on the craft. So I'm just going to create, Shift A, create a cylinder. And just scale it way down, SZ. And let's create a cube, scale it way down. And I'm just going to set the cube over here so it'll be easier for us to duplicate this if we need it. So Shift D, move it over here, and just join these 2 parts. Come in here, select our cube, go to faces. Actually, what I want to do is I want to delete this face. I'll select this, SZ, scale it up a little bit, and just want to get it into place here. Something like that. Shift D. And just duplicating them around this platform. And I think really what I probably should have done, let me delete this. Put a little bit more detail on this. So E, scale it down, extrude it, go into our side view here, rotate that, E, scale it. Okay, L, select that, and then duplicate them. RZ90, rotate, did it rotate the right direction? It's never the right direction. So RZ180, rotate that around, select this, duplicate this, move it over here, RZ180, I'll select this, duplicate it, and RZ180. So we have something that looks sort of like that. And maybe even if I select vertices, kind of move that up, make it thinner. And of course we can always modify that if we need to later. Now as we're making all these minute details, I always like to make something that somebody will look at and say, you know, hey, I think that is something that may not belong there, or maybe it belongs there, but it just looks interesting. Like for example, if we go back to our reference picture and we look at the details here, we see this here. To me, that is the lunar module. And I like to think that John Berkey probably put that in there as sort of a inside joke that, you know, you have this advanced space station or whatever it is, and yet you have the lunar module there, which is really interesting. Another example is in the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. On one of the physical models of the alien ships, one of the UFOs, they actually had a little model of R2-D2 on there, which was interesting. So we can think about what kind of object we want to place on our ship. Of course, you don't have to do it if you don't want to, but it may just add a little bit of level of mystique to it, make it more interesting. So right now, I'm not going to make that object. I'll be thinking about what I want to do for that. And you can, of course, do whatever you like there. But I'm going to make, probably just as like a stand-in for now, I'm going to make a little spaceship. So I'm just going to grab the cube here, do a Shift-D to duplicate, and tab into Edit Mode, choose Faces, and just going to start creating a little spacecraft here. Extrude out, scale it down. Actually, back up a little bit. Take this, move it out a little bit, extrude, scale it out here, extrude, extrude out some wings. And of course, if you were making a high detailed model, you would use mirroring to do this. But since I'm just making like a low poly, quick kind of thing here, oops, just doing it quick and dirty. Okay, and then take that entire spacecraft and scale it down on the Z, clean it up a little bit, and maybe give it a little bit of character here. Add that face. Actually, let's do a loop cut, Control R. And then grab one of our little pieces over here. Make it a separate part and join it to this. Scale along the Z, maybe scale along the XY, make it a little bit thicker. This will be like the landing feet or whatever. And just duplicate them. Nothing fancy, just something very quick here. And something like that. May not even use this, just something quick to throw in there. And it's sitting there on its landing pad. Okay, and there's some of our assets that we're going to be using for our details. But we're not quite done. We need to make quite a few more to continue on. So in the next section, section 8, we'll continue with creating more of these small details that we're going to be using on the craft.